We are all so caught up in the salacious and divisive details of Lady Antebellum deciding to change their name to Lady A in an attempt to renounce a term associated with slavery, that we as music business professionals are ignoring the fact that if this can happen to Anita White, the real Lady A, then it can happen to you too.
There's someone you should know.
Hey everybody, welcome to the BOMB Podcast. BOMB stands for Business of Music Bootcamp, which means that this is the place where we will drill down on the business and legal aspects of the music industry. Everything from copyrights and contracts to policies and practices. Whatever it takes to educate and empower you with the knowledge you need to make informed decisions about how to protect yourself and your music is what you'll find on the BOMB. I'm your host, Professor Butler, and as a retired entertainment attorney, former record label executive, music law professor, and college administrator, I have counseled thousands of artists and musicians on the intricacies of the music business. Now it's your turn.
The information in this podcast is not intended, nor should it be construed as legal advice. If you have questions of a legal nature, we strongly recommend that you contact an attorney in your local jurisdiction who specializes in music and/or entertainment law. For guidance, check out our website at professorbutler.com and sign up to receive a free resource on how to find the right lawyer for you. And now, your host of the BOMB Podcast, Professor Butler.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the BOMB Podcast, episode number 3. I'm your host, Professor Butler, and before we jump into this week's episode, I have to tell you that I do not normally chase news stories unless they just happen to coincide with a business or legal topic that I had already planned to cover. Well, it just so happens that the subject of this week's podcast is trademark law, which coincidentally coincides with a recent news story involving a dispute between country trio Lady Antebellum and Seattle-based blues singer Lady A. So what I decided to do was, rather than making this an hour-long episode, I decided to do a part 1 and a part 2. This week, part 1 will review how the Lady Antebellum Lady A dispute got started, how it's similar to another famous trademark dispute. And in next week's episode, I'll put the finishing touches on the Lady A dispute, break down the specifics of trademark law and trademark infringement, and discuss how to keep this same thing from happening to you. All right, so just in case you haven't already heard or read about it, let's start from the beginning. Last month, on June 11th, the multi-Grammy-winning country group Lady Antebellum changed its name to Lady A, saying that they were, in retrospect, regretful and embarrassed that they hadn't considered the loaded and racist history of the word antebellum, which refers to a period of history before the Civil War, which includes slavery. The band claims that when they formed the group 14 years ago, they did not know of the word's association with slavery, despite the fact that, according to National Public Radio, journalists had challenged them about the name as early as 2011. That's neither here nor there. Anyway, the name change came in the wake of a renewed Black Lives Matter movement following the death of George Floyd, where many individuals, companies, and other organizations are reevaluating some of their racially insensitive practices. In a statement released by the band regarding the name change, they said this, and I quote, "After much personal reflection, band discussion, prayer, and many honest conversations with some of our closest Black friends and colleagues, we have decided to drop the word antebellum from our name and move forward as Lady A, the nickname our fans gave us almost from the start. We are deeply sorry for this hurt, or any hurt that this has caused, and for anyone who has felt unsafe, unseen, or unvalued. The band continues, causing pain was never our heart's intention, but it doesn't change the fact that indeed it did just that. So today we speak up and make a change. And then later on in the statement, they say, our next outward step will be a donation to the Equal Justice Initiative through Lady Aid, which is the group's charitable organization. All right, so in the wake of George Floyd, they want to express how much Black Lives Matter to them. So they're going to change their name from Lady Antebellum to Lady A. All right. Next day on Instagram, however, a Seattle-based blues singer by the name of Anita White, who just happens to be Black and who just happens to have been using the name Lady A for the past 20 years, blasted the group on social media, saying the following, and I quote, "How can you say Black Lives Matter and put your knee on the neck of another Black artist? I'm not mad. I am, however, not giving up my name, my brand that I worked hard for." Now, at the time, the singer told Rolling Stone that no one from the group reached out to her prior to revealing their name change. However, a few days later on social media, Lady Antebellum, or the new Lady A, posted that they had privately connected with Anita White, the singer, to discuss the name. They claim to have had transparent, and this is quotes, transparent, honest, and authentic conversations, and that they not only apologized to her, but they were excited to share that they are moving forward with positive solutions and common ground. Now, doesn't that sound nice? Sounds like everybody's getting along, right? And according to Lady A, or Anita White, Lady A, she accepted their apology and stated that she and the group, quote, talked about attempting to coexist, but didn't discuss what that would look like. But she was clear, I am keeping my name. White also added, now we are turning hurt into hope. Now that is special. Mind you, though, that was last month. It didn't take long for hope to turn sour, because as of the date of this podcast, Lady Antebellum is now suing Anita White for the right to use her name. Oh my God, this is insane. And while there is so much more to this story, in particular from the legal standpoint, which I will share, I would like to stop the madness for just a moment in order to do what I do best, which is to educate and empower people like you. The people listening to this podcast, singers, songwriters, musicians, producers, and others who have chosen to listen to me because you heard, somebody told you, or you learned for yourself after listening to the first 2 episodes, that I provide real, honest information that will help you to protect yourself, your music, and in this case, your name. Now, you may have also heard something else about me, which is that if I don't do anything else, I'm going to tell you the truth. Okay, well, get ready because here it comes. First of all, if you haven't already noticed, either seen my picture or a little bit of my voice, you may have noticed that I'm a Black woman. All right. What you didn't know is that I rarely talk about politics. However, this is one of those times where I feel that I really need to make my opinion known before I go into the details of this story. I cannot and do not speak for all Black people when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Although we as Black people are glad that people have been awakened, and as some say, are now woke to the point where they're making conscious decisions to be socially, racially, and culturally conscious in the wake of blatant racism and police brutality. Okay? As Black people, we may be glad, but we ain't happy. We ain't happy for two reasons. Number one, it took so damn long for people to wake up to something that Black people have been fighting against and complaining about for the 400 years it's been since we were brought to this country. Okay, we've been fighting for equal rights ever since we got here. Now, that's one reason we ain't happy. The second reason we ain't happy is because most of this social justice awareness, right, that we're starting to see all of a sudden from all these people in the form of what I call little bandwagon gestures, okay, they do not address the root of the problem, which is ongoing and systemic racism. And when individuals, companies, and organizations change their names and their brands, right, that they knew were insulting and demeaning to people of color when they created them, right, either because you knew inherently or because we told you they were insulting, your gestures and donations are merely a way to assuage decades of guilt that also just happen to look good and sound good in a press release. So, with that said, we may be glad that some things are beginning to change, but we just ain't happy. At least not yet. So, there I said it. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Now, the second part of the truth, right, has nothing to do with politics, has nothing to do with social injustice, but has everything to do with what I do, which is the music business. If you look at this Lady A issue from a purely music business perspective, which is exactly what I do, you will see more than just a rich white artist exercising its white privilege against a poor Black artist, okay? What you'll see is a big guy exercising its economic power and status privilege against a little guy. Now, hear me out. We are all so caught up in the salacious and divisive details of Lady Antebellum deciding to change their name to Lady A in an attempt to renounce a term associated with slavery, that we, as music business professionals, are ignoring the fact that if this can happen to Anita White, the real Lady A, then it can happen to you too. And if you think I'm wrong, just ask Chroma EU. Who or what is Chroma EU? All right, check this out. In 2012, Kim, Kourtney, and Khloe Kardashian were enlisted as celebrity endorsees by Boldface Licensing and Branding. And most of the time, I'll just refer to them as Boldface, to present their new line of beauty products known as the Chroma Beauty Collection. Well, it just so happens that there was a makeup studio in Los Angeles, California called Chroma Makeup. And although Boldface spelled Chroma K-H-R-O-M-A, and the makeup studio spelled it C-H-R-O-M-A, you will soon learn that even a name that's spelled differently can infringe upon another person's trademark rights if the names sound the same. And in this case, they do. They're both pronounced Chroma, but one with a K, one with a C. All right. More on that later. But in response to the Kardashians and the Boldface Chroma infringing upon the trademark of the LA makeup studio's Chroma, the makeup studio filed a trademark infringement lawsuit in California District Court. And District Court is the lowest level. Above that is appeals court and then Supreme Court. Okay. The owner of the makeup studio, and who just happened to be the owner of the name Chroma with a C, claimed that his company had been using the name Chroma for 12 years, and that not only was the Kardashian boldface brand infringing upon his trademark, it was creating consumer confusion and tarnishing his brand's image. And we're going to talk a lot about consumer confusion next week. I just want to be able to get through the story, though, so that you'll have the foundation. So, based on the details of Chroma with a C Studios' claim, they filed a temporary injunction against the Kardashians' Chroma with a K, which means they wanted Boldface and the Kardashians to stop using the name until the trademark dispute was settled. Because what can happen is when you sue somebody, they can generate more damages if they're allowed to continue the practice that you're suing them for. So generally what you do is you ask for an injunction, temporary, right, to stop them from selling or doing whatever it is they're doing until the case is settled. So that's what Chroma with a C did in this case. Now, unfortunately, the studio was not awarded that injunction, but they still had a pretty good case against Boldface and the Kardashians. So what was the result? The case was settled out of court in January of 2014 for an undisclosed amount of money, and the Kardashians and Boldface licensing were allowed to continue using the Chroma name. Alrighty then, let's fast forward. Same year, 2014, 2 years after the launch of the Kardashians' Chroma, another Chroma surfaces. This time, it was a European distributor of cosmetics called Chroma Makeup EU. Now, their Chroma was spelled Kroma. So, where the Kardashians brand had the Kroma. All right. So, the name Chroma, spelled Kroma, was owned by a woman named Lee Tillett. Tillett created the Chroma brand and licensed the name to Chroma EU. So this is really important. Miss Tillett owned the rights to the Chroma name worldwide, but she licensed the right to another company to distribute, import, sell Chroma brand cosmetics throughout Europe. All right. So when Tillett gets wind of the Boldface Chroma brand, she immediately sends them a cease and desist letter. And remember, cease and desist means I know what you're doing. You're infringing upon my rights. You need to stop right now or else I'm going to sue you, right? So she sends the cease and desist letter demanding that Boldface stop using her name. Boldface then, instead of stopping using the name, right, they turn around and sue Miss Tillett. The exact same way that Lady Antebellum is now suing Lady A. Now get this now. The person who owns the name isn't suing. It's the person that's stealing the name that's suing the person that owns the name. More on that later. So the lawsuit was filed in order to get the court to declare that Boldface's brand Chroma Beauty, right, the one endorsed by the Kardashians, did not infringe upon Tillett's Chroma makeup brand, even though Boldface's application to trade name or trademark the name Chroma had been rejected. All right. Why had it been rejected? Well, because you can't get a registered trademark on a mark that already exists. And Chroma already existed and was owned by Lee Tillett. All right. So Tillett, owner of Chroma, turned around and sued them back, called a counterclaim. But this time she added each of the Kardashian sisters individually as defendants to her claim. The California District Court awarded Tillett a preliminary injunction against Boldface and the Kardashians, which means that, now check this out. The injunction, remember, means that you have to stop doing what you're doing. This injunction against Boldface and the Kardashians meant that they had to stop selling and distributing Chroma products. So as a result of the district court's finding that the Kardashians' Chroma was likely to infringe upon the trademark of Lee Tillett's Chroma, Boldface had to stop distributing the Kardashian Chroma brand and begin pulling existing products from the stores. They had to stop selling it immediately. I do believe in some states they may have had a sell-off, and in other states they had to just completely remove it off the shelves. The damage to the Kardashians and to Boldface was estimated to be like in the millions of dollars, but the judge didn't care because the judge said whatever the Kardashians suffer couldn't come close to what would happen to Tillett. The judge said that the Boldface marks were backed by the Kardashians' nationwide fame, that Boldface's product line had received extensive nationwide media coverage, that it's been shown to millions of viewers on an episode of the Kardashians' reality TV show, Keeping Up the Kardashians, that the makeup products had been promoted on each of the Kardashian sisters' websites and their social media pages and in the national press. So the judge said basically that although their products, or Kardashians' products, were in 5,321 stores in 48 states, right? And available online on Boldface's website, that they had to stop selling it and pull it from the shelves. And why? Because their trademark infringement was causing harm to Tillett's trademark ownership. Tillett had already proven that since the Kardashian brand was launched, that Chroma EU sales dropped by 25%. This is where something called consumer confusion comes in, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, but the purpose of trademark protection is really to prevent consumer confusion. That's why you can't have two marks with the same name. And the court had little doubt that the Kardashian-backed Chroma beauty products would likely eliminate and eventually destroy Tillett's business entirely. This means that there would have been irreparable harm to Tillett, which was sufficient enough to justify the injunction and the stopping of the sales and distribution of the Kardashian Chroma products. And all of this that I just mentioned was reported in an article or two, I think it was a couple of articles, done by The Hollywood Reporter. So since the court found that Miss Tillett had the strongest claim and that she would have likely prevailed in court if they were to pursue the matter further, Boldface decided right then and there to change the name of the Kardashian Chroma to Kardashian Beauty. And the parties settled the dispute out of court for an undisclosed amount. All right, end of story. The little guy wins, right? Big guy sues little guy sues back. Little guy has a stronger claim and can prove consumer confusion and can prove monetary losses. So they win against the big guy and get the big guy to change their name to something else. End of story. Right? Wrong. Why? Well, we left somebody else out of the picture, right? Remember Chroma EU, the company that was distributing the products in Europe? They are the ones who licensed the name Chroma from Lee Tillett in the first place. However, they were not a party to Tillett's lawsuit against the Kardashians. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky, so stick with me. Look, like it hasn't already gotten tricky, but follow me. Under U.S. trademark law, only the owner of the trademark can enforce or sue to enforce the mark. I'll give you an example. I own, and this is true, I own the trademark The Bomb Podcast and the Business of Music Bootcamp. All right, let's say that I decide that I don't want to host a podcast anymore. So I'm going to license the right to use the Bomb name to somebody else. Why? Because the Bomb name has been branded and everybody recognizes it and everybody knows who it is, right? So I'm going to license the name of my podcast, The Bomb, to, let's say Oprah, right? Because I love Oprah. And she's going to call it The Bomb Podcast with your host, Oprah Winfrey. Okay, fine. If someone were to try to steal the name The Bomb, I could sue that person because I own the name. But Oprah, unless we said so in our agreement, would not be able to sue the person for their use of the name. I'll say that again. If I own the name and I license it to you and someone steals the name, right? I can sue because I'm the owner. You can't sue because you're just a licensee. And unless our license agreement gave you the right to sue, so unless I gave you the right to sue in the license agreement, you would not be able to do so. Well, that's exactly what happened to Chroma. In the Chroma case, Lee Tillett owned the name Chroma, licensed it, gave it to Chroma EU, the right to use the name in the European Union, right? But she never gave them the right to enforce their rights in the name. Therefore, when she countersued the Kardashians in boldface, she got paid in a settlement, but she didn't share any of that out-of-court settlement with Chroma EU. Basically, she got her money, left them holding the bag with a name, right, that was now diminished, right, because it had been used by the Kardashians. Oh, man. And to make matters worse, the licensing company that used the Kardashians' name had been selling the Kardashian brand in Europe as well, which is why Chroma EU said that it infringed upon their use of the name. So to make a long story short, right, lawsuits start flying. Chroma EU sues Lee Tillett, the one who gave them the name in the first place, right, for breach of contract. Chroma EU also sues Boldface, the licensing company, and the Kardashians for willful trademark infringement. And this is what happened. The United States District Court and the U.S. Court of Appeals ruled against Chroma EU, stating that although the company had been using the name for years, they did not own the name. They merely licensed the name from Tillett, who had already settled with the Kardashians. Oh, man. Chroma EU, right, the little guy in this case, who, and I'm sorry to use this language, but got screwed by not just the Kardashians, but by their licensor, Lee Tillett, right? They refused to give up and tried one more time and pursued this action to the Supreme Court to review. And the Supreme Court refused to hear the case, which they can do, which means that whatever the decision of the lower court was, which was the Court of Appeals, will stand. And the lower Court of Appeals said that EU's Chroma had no standing. Had no standing. What that means is that they don't own the mark, so they don't have any right to sue or enforce the rights associated with the mark. Oh boy. So what's the point of this story? And what does that have to do with Lady Antebellum and Lady A and you, for that matter? Well, I told you that story because Lady A, Anita White, is Chroma. Lady Antebellum is the Kardashians. And either party could be you if you don't protect your rights. So you may end up being the one to sue or the one being sued. The Lady A dispute is more than just about black and white and social injustice, all right? It's really about someone bigger than you and richer than you trying to take away your name and your livelihood just because they can. So, what is a little guy or a little gal to do to protect themselves? For example, is there anything that Chroma EU could have done to protect themselves? And the answer is yes. As I mentioned earlier, Chroma EU filed suit against Lee Tillett, who owned the name Chroma, for breach of contract. And the issue was that Tillett had licensed the right to Chroma EU in Europe, but she retained the rights to Chroma in the United States. So when she settled with the Kardashians in boldface, it was for their distribution of Chroma in the United States, not in Europe. And the Kardashians' Chroma was being distributed in Europe, which violated Chroma EU's rights. But because Chroma EU did not own the name, they did not have standing, which basically means the right to sue. Had Tillett, in the exclusive license agreement, given Chroma EU the right to sue in their contract, things would have turned out differently. But according to the judge in the lawsuit, the plain language of the agreement between Tillett and Chroma EU demonstrated the parties' intent for Tillett to retain all ownership and enforcement of the rights. And while Chroma EU may have had other rights under the agreement, they don't possess the ability to assert their rights in the trademark in that proceeding. And that's why they were left out in the cold. So what did we learn today? Well, in a nutshell, we learned that it is very possible for someone bigger than you and richer than you to come along and try to steal your name just because they can. And in next week's episode, I'm going to go into detail as to how to protect your name. The second thing we learned, though, however, is if you are licensing someone else's name, in that license agreement, you really have to be given permission or license to not only use the name, but to sue others and enforce your rights in the name, or else you'll be left out in the cold, just like Chroma EU was. Woo! So, back to the question, how does this relate to you and what can you do to protect yourself and your name? Well, we're out of time. So you'll just have to tune in to next week's episode entitled, What If They Steal My Name? Part 2, for my review, more specifically of U.S. trademark law, trademark infringement, and your ability to keep your name and enforce your rights. Until then, I hope you enjoyed episode 3 of the Bomb Podcast, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for joining me on the Bomb Podcast. If you were educated, empowered, or inspired by what you heard, please subscribe today to be the first to receive the latest episode. And don't forget, post a review, tell a friend, follow me on social media, and join my tribe at ProfessorButler.com.